vampires only come out at night? Can you only kill a vampire with a stake through its heart? Can you keep vampires away with garlic? Do all vampires drink human blood? Are vampires puppets of the devil? Is there really such a thing as vampires?
In 1897, an Irish writer named Bram Stoker penned the novel Dracula. It was based on a bunch of very, very realistic ship logs, notes, but it was completely fictitious. But it launched a franchise that I wish I had 0.1% of. Based loosely on a historic figure by the name of Vlad Dracula, it has transformed horror, just like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Both of those stories are in the public domain. Since then, there have been books, comic books, graphic novels, movies, television shows, you name it, about vampires and Draculas of different sorts. But we're not here really to talk about fictional vampires. That's not my style, right? Let's take a look at real vampires.
Yo guys, it's Ricky, and I am out and about, and I ran across a place that is kind of bizarre, that I don't know what happened here. There's pieces of foundation and some brick walls. I don't know if it was a camping site. I don't really know what. I'll take you around here in a while. But I really came here just to kind of find some kind of a spot where I could talk about vampires. But before we talk about vampires, let's talk about this weird little cave kind of thing over here, okay? Let's go. So I'm not sure what this was. What was here, I don't know. Maybe it was a pool over here somewhere, although I don't see any place where a pool would have been. And it was a pump house, but there's shelving. I don't know. Looks like some kind of a weird mine shaft, but I don't think so. It's a lot like other urban legends. You want to believe something, but how much of the kernel of truth is there really? And how much has it changed? And does the kernel of truth actually skew the fact that it was maybe even worse? If you talk about Vladimir the Impaler from Romania, Transylvania, the emperor, the leader of an army who would impale people on stakes, hundreds of them. And then when they were all dead, he would dip his bread in their blood and dine. That guy, have you heard about this guy?
Vlad Dracula, or Vlad the Impaler, was one of the most gruesome and sadistic figures in history, in human history, period. He tortured his enemies, he tortured people that opposed him, and he will go down in history as a living devil.
For any of you that don't know what impaling is, well, typically it goes up your butt, and it's usually a stake that is somewhat rounded off so it doesn't damage internal organs. And it can be pushed all the way through the mouth, and then the pole is risen up, and it takes the victim 1, 2, 3 days to die. Probably one of the worst ways to go, besides maybe burning, which is usually even faster than that. Because what Vlad did was, his town, Wallachia, was in such ruin that he invited everybody to a banquet. And he knew there'd be pushback. When everybody showed up, the poor, everybody wanted a handout, of course. He had them all killed. He had them stabbed. they're still twitching bodies he had impaled, just to send a message that, hey, I'm the one in charge. There were other rumors that the blood was drained into a cauldron and he bathed in it for days, and supposedly it was his fountain of youth. There's horrible stories about Vlad Dracula. Enough about cruel medieval rulers and novelists of yore. What about real vampires? I mean, 2020. Is there such a thing? There are actually people that do drink blood. They say that they need the psychic energy from the blood to survive. There's a path here. I don't know whether this was some kind of a housing unit. I don't know if it was a house here. This would have been a really cool property to live at, I know that. Here's a series of steps. This is definitely a nice piece of foundation here. So what was here? It's crazy. Most of these areas back here were some kind of campsite, but get a clue. I'm not sure what that means. But you know me. Looks like a water main to me, but I figured I'd get a clue first. There was a man by the name of John Brennan Crutchley, and he was a weirdo. What his thing was, is he was considered the vampire rapist. So he would get his victims, women, and he would not only rape them, but drain their blood, literally. I don't know what kind of a guy he was, but I would venture to say not a good one. Let's talk a little bit more about Crutchley. I'm right by Get a Clue area. Maybe that'd be a good picture. I think I might take a picture of that. Let's talk about Crutchley. The FBI profiler, the very famous one, Robert Ressler, described his personality, Crutchley's personality, as being that of a typical serial killer. In 1985, a woman was picked up alongside a road. Trucks had passed her. She had been crawling very slowly. She was bloody all over. She went to the hospital. They found out she had been raped. She had been missing between 45 and 50% of the blood in her body. And she kept saying to the driver of the truck that picked her up, "Please do not take me back to that house." She apparently was hitchhiking along the road and was picked up by Crutchley. Crutchley actually put her on a kitchen tabletop and tied her down. He went for 3 rounds of taking her blood, and then the next day assaulted her sexually again. I think up to 3 times he sexually assaulted her and took her blood, and said that he was a vampire. Man, he needed it. Wow. There are several stories about vampire killers, and one of them that keeps coming back is one particular one out of Australia called the lesbian vampire killer. There was an Edward Baldock who was walking home one evening from a pub,
and 4 ladies pulled up to him in a car and promised him sexual favors. One of those people was Tracy Wigington, who seemed to be the head honcho, and she lured him into the car, and they went to a park down by the river where he was promised sexual favors. According to Wigington, who is a self-proclaimed vampire, she murdered him and then drank his blood. Her cash card was found in around the area right there, and it was a dead giveaway who she was, so the police quickly arrested her. At her trial, Wigington told the jury that she drank pig's blood and cow's blood that she got from the local butcher, and that she never had any solid food. Her then girlfriend, Lisa Pachansky, said that she would slit her wrists and let Tracy drink blood from her. Wigington and Pachansky were sentenced to life imprisonment. One of the other women, who was Kim Jarvis, was sentenced to 18 years. There was a 4th woman. There was a Tracy Wogg that didn't take any part in the murder, who was just along for the ride, and she did not serve any time. Wigington lost several different parole hearings, but in 2011, she actually was granted parole, and she was released in December of 2011. And she lives in somewhere in Australia. Whether she still drinks blood or not, I don't know. So there were certainly vampire wannabes and bookworms and people that romanticize vampirism, and those people sometimes get involved in cosplay, but then there's a more serious side to it. So let's just break that down for just a second. First of all, a lot of this has come from history. There's a lot of historic references to vampirism, especially in Europe. Here's a 700-year-old skeleton that was discovered in Bulgaria. The teeth were found removed, and it was stabbed through the heart with an iron rod. Scholars believe that this was some kind of fear of vampirism at the time. Is there any real biological pertinency to any of this stuff? Well, there is a condition called porphyria. It's a group of 8 blood disorders that affect the body's molecular machinery. It stops it from making heme, which is part of hemoglobin, which is an extreme lack of iron, and iron gives the blood its red tone. People with porphyria are extremely tired. They're extremely light-skinned because when they go outside, their skin gets damaged very, very easily. I mean, it gets blisters, it's painful, and they just can't take the sunlight. Even on a cloudy day, there's enough ultraviolet light to cause blisters and body disfigurement for these people. Staying indoors and receiving blood transfusions is about the only thing that makes these people feel better. In ancient times, drinking animal blood and emerging only at night probably fueled the fire for a lot of this type of vampirism type lore, where they had no way to test people and understand what this disease might have been. On the other hand, there's a psychological disorder, and it's vampire personality disorder, or clinical vampirism, or more clinically known as Renfield syndrome. And it's a true neurological disease. Psychiatrists have long been aware that there is a connection between this delusional notion that he or she has to drink blood to feel good. This arises from, of course, fiction and movies and stuff, but a lot of times it's a sexual connection to it, and it develops through fantasies involving sexual excitement. It usually starts with auto-vampirism, which is where somebody sucks the blood from his or her own wrist. They cut themselves and they start sucking blood, and then they start wanting to suck the blood from other people. Now, there are self-admitted vampires and people that are not psycho. They just simply feel that they feed off the energy of drinking blood or thinking that they're vampires. If we're going to go with this concept, then let's talk about the 3 types of vampires that walk among us. One is a sanguinary, one is of energy, and one is of sexual nature. So let's break it down even further. A sanguinary vampire is one who drinks blood to nourish their body. It is part of their physical needs. An energy or aura vampire is one that simply
identifies themselves and is more one who feeds off the energy of others. That's probably the most common type of vampire. The third type is a sexual vampire that feeds off sexual energy, and these people, maybe we know some of them, they possess this charismatic personality and can charm the pants off of somebody, according to reports. So these three types of vampires fall into something that many people regard as just normal vampires that walk among us, and they have what they call a court. And these courts have monthly meetings to discuss their vampirism, hang out, chill out with each other. They host events. One of the biggest events is in Austin, Texas, and it's a big vampire ball. There was almost 600 people last year at this thing. I don't know what's going to happen with coronavirus, but so if you think that maybe you are a vampire or you want to be a vampire, you are not alone. They have Facebook pages. There is, I will put a link to the Court of Austin if you really are interested in that. And I'm sure there's ones in maybe even every major city. I don't know. Some of these people may get laughed at, and which is why they have these secret societies. So at the end of the day, there's still the question, are vampires real? Well, yes and no. And I hate that I have to say it that way. But if you think vampires are the living dead that sleep in coffins, well, some people do sleep in coffins, but hang upside down, and they will live forever provided they drink blood, and they can only be killed by a stake through the heart and are afraid of garlic and all that kind of stuff. Probably no. Not all, but some of it is based in fantasy. Some are based in these psychological things that happened to people then and now, and some physical things that have happened to people. So, I mean, are there blood disorders? Are there psychological things that make people different? Yes, that is true. So there is from that standpoint. Maybe somebody that just identifies as a vampire because it's who they feel that they are, who's to say they're wrong? And if they live their life happily and they don't hurt anybody, hey, what's the big deal? I just don't want to see people take this vampire thing to some other place where people are harmed or murdered. I think there's fun, sexy ways to play out that fantasy. And I ask you the question, are you a vampire? Guys, if you haven't been to this channel, I am Rikki Rockett. I'm the drummer for the band Poison, but I love researching urban legends and scary stories. If you haven't subscribed, I'd love to have you subscribe. Hit the like button if you like the video, and turn on your notifications so you're notified when I upload a new video. Take care of each other and keep rock alive.